What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Severe MMA Podcast Premium. And today I was thinking about doing the Q&A here, and myself and Graham were like, there's some good questions coming in. We need some topics. We need some extra parts for discussion. And someone sent in a really good question. I think it's something we've kind of talked about before, and I think it's something which we can discuss further. And it's from Danny Berry over on Twitter. So the question that came in is, odd question. After watching football, WWE, and other combat sports highlights, do you consider them to be at their final form, where MMA is still in its infancy? Compared to MMA and BJJ, they really haven't changed since the 90s. Like, I think this is a very interesting question. Obviously, we were just talking about.
Well, yeah, but just on that question, I think I was actually watching Second Captain's podcast. We're doing this thing last night where they were live tweeting, or not live tweeting, but as live tweeting the Liverpool Newcastle 4-3 game back in 1996 soccer match, where Collymore scored the last minute winner, and you could just see the standard of football was just awful compared to now. So I think like other sports are developing, and if you look at NFL like 10 years ago or 15 years ago and you look at it now, it was not a completely different game, but it's a very different game. Like even in 5 years, the quarterbacks are much more protected. Things that would have been a great play 5-10 years ago is now like ejected from the gameplay and a bad play.
How much of that do you think, and I agree with that as well, but like how much of that do you think is actually like, I think with MMA, it's different the way it's getting better or changing, because at the start we had Heist Gracie who couldn't throw a punch, or guys who couldn't do a takedown or couldn't do a rear naked choke or whatever, and it was this it was the lack of skills, or it was the lack of skills, but it's the not having those skills, not learning those skills, or not even needing the skills at that time. Whereas I think with other sports,
working with one base, with your base, and just using that, basically trying to get the game, the fight to your game was a lot of the early days was strictly that.
Yeah, and
there was no well-rounded guys.
I think with other sports, it's technology. Like, even if you look at soccer, we'll get into other things in a second, but if you look at soccer, how much of a difference did the improvements of pitches make? Like, that alone, I think, like Man City, the way they play in Barcelona, their slick passing play, would that be able to have been done in the early 90s just because of the pitches? Like,
well, you can see it even when, for example, a Man City or Liverpool go play on a bad pitch, or a pitch where they've let the grass grow long to try and restrict that. So like, yeah, it definitely slows down the play. You see it like, Anfield and the Etihad Stadium, they have the pitch like the grass and the pitch cut very, very low. So it facilitates, and they have it watered as well to facilitate quick passing and on the ground passing. And you see sometimes even in matches, for example, if Liverpool were to play like a Champions League group game against one of the kind of fourth seed teams, or Man City, where you might get a pitch where it's not great, or depending on the time of the year, you might get that in the FA Cup or something like that as well. So you see that from time to time, and you do see that, and you kind of have to. Well, these teams do end up usually playing a slightly different game, not what they would play at the Etihad or Anfield, for example.
Yeah, and I think I think that's a big thing as well, because those kind of outside forces, maybe not outside those what's the word I'm looking for? The things that can affect the game in other sports are not there at all in MMA. Like, the octagon, changed a little bit, but it's been basically the same octagon since literally day one. Like, you might have a different floor and cage wires and stuff, but you might have a round
sometimes
one.
Though in MMA, sometimes I think they still do it. They used to do it anyway. I'm pretty sure they still do it, where they have one cage that is actually smaller, and one cage that's bigger, and that definitely, and there was stats out before that said it definitely affected the amount of like finishes in the fights.
Yeah, I don't think there are as much anymore in the UFC. I think it's when we used to always talk about before the smaller cage, but you rarely see the smaller cage. No, I don't think they really use it anymore. But like, I think that's one thing that'll actually help MMA. Like, I've always thought the UFC should actually just make the octagon available. You know, they have a trademark on the octagon or whatever it is. I actually don't think that's good. I think if everyone was allowed to use it, it'd actually benefit the UFC because we'd be more useful. You know, maybe that's a small thing and we're getting caught up in that. But overall, like, the thing about the UFC is, right, like, say you look at soccer, and obviously I'm sure drugs helped a lot, and I'm sure strength and conditioning helped a lot to get players to where they are today. And as I said, the pitches and just
nutrition, not drinking, all that stuff, like loads of different factors.
Yeah, even like you look at Limerick and Hurling last year when they or 2 years ago when they won the All Ireland, and you know, the captain went up and he did a speech and he called out like you know, the team and the management and everything, but then there was like the nutrition staff, the mental staff, there's like 30 people, and that's on a GA team. Can you imagine how many Liverpool have, or Man United have, or AC Milan or Real Madrid have?
Liverpool got a throw-in coach, and people were kind of like laughing at it, and then. But if you actually watch the games, like Liverpool very rarely lose a throw-in. Like, and a throw-in historically is kind of like it's not a 50-50 thing, but there's a good chance that if you launch a throw in, like if you just kind of throw one up there in the general direction of one of your players, that you know,
bring him back,
that you're gonna lose the ball. Like, but Liverpool's, you know, you got to have these little like percentage gains on other teams and to improve yourself. Like if you're staying still, you're losing ground on the others, and it's the same in MMA. Like if you're out of the game for a while, you're not training, you're missing out. For example, in jiu-jitsu, there's like new like moves, new guards all the time, and all this stuff, and if you're out of the game or you're injured or you're out drinking or whatever, you're missing out on all that. And it's the game's evolving, and you're, even though you're not getting worse, you know, relatively you are.
And I think as well, the point, you know, you make a good point there, and I think that point stands, and a lot of that has to do with the money and the coaching as well. Because even like, okay, we look at, let's take coaching first. Like coaching, is there one coach in the world, or maybe, you know, there is one, but maybe there's 5 coaches in the world whose word you might take as gospel on how to coach an MMA fighter, but there isn't that many, just because it's such a new sport. Like
but even those coaches at the top of the game that you're talking about, their thinking would evolve over like experience and trial and error and lessons learned, and you have to have that open mind. If you're thinking, oh, I know it all, like, for example, like these coaches at the top level probably haven't come into the game recently. They've been around for a long time. They've made a lot of mistakes or learned a lot of things about like weight cutting and about when to train, how hard to train, not overtraining, all that stuff. Like you have to have an open mind. You have to keep learning. If you want to be a top coach, you can't kind of have a closed mind and think you know what's right in such a complicated sport and such a new sport with like nutrition and all that stuff. Like the thinking on that evolves all the time as well, and it's just such an evolving sport that you really got to be on your toes and open to new information, and learn lessons quickly if you want to get an advantage over other camps and fighters.
Yeah, and I think it's the thing about being an MMA coach is you just can't be a great MMA coach. As you said, you have to move with the times and see all the adjustments and how, you know, the improvements in the world of MMA and all the different, you know, boxing, jiu-jitsu, all the different facets of it. But then you have to be like someone who's able to stay in favor with your fighter, you know, because they may leave you. Then you have to be someone who's a businessman as well. And like, I think MMA a lot of times as well, it's about selling that you have the answer. So you have to be like a bit of a snake oil salesman at times as well. And I know a lot of these guys aren't, a lot of them are as well, but you have to have all those things to become that great coach. So it's very difficult. And I also think the point on the money, like, even, you know, you look at the GA, Dublin have loads and loads of money, but even Limerick, like, we've JP McManus, who's like one of the richest men in Ireland, and he's like gives loads of money in sponsorship, so Limerick can go and get all of these. Caroline Curran, I think is her name. She's like a really good like mental health coach. She's won like 5 All Irelands with 5 different counties and things like that. Like, can fucking, you know, Kiefer Crosby afford that? Or can even the likes of Tyron Woodley, who was a champion, afford that? Like, I'm not sure if that's well, it's not possible, I know, for most people. And I think that's a big difference between obviously Liverpool, Man United, you know, fucking Munster, Leinster, Toulouse, they all have it, like, but they have it because of the money. Like, I don't know, is that something right that obviously we don't have yet. Some people have it. I'm sure some people have mental coaches, and I'm sure like the likes of Conor McGregor or John Jones have different sorts of coaches and different sorts of things from other people because they have more money and they can afford it. But I wonder with the way MMA is kind of improving, and I talked about coaches like I think John Kavanagh is one who has got like loads of gyms behind him, loads of SPGs, obviously with Matt Thornton, I think is his name, isn't it? Yeah. So like they have kind of maybe developed, and I know a lot of people don't like it. We won't get into that debate again. But they have kind of developed this database of gyms, and with that, you're going to obviously be bringing in more money. So maybe in that way, you can afford to like bring in those people. So you could have like a strength and conditioning coach, a nutrition coach, like a mind coach who is at your gym for 1 week and then goes down to Killarney or maybe goes over to one in London or wherever else they have it and moves around and helps and improves MMA all around because they have the money to afford that. Like I think we are at a stage now where we've what did I say before the podcast, 27 years of MMA, and it's really been, you know, I'm going full Brennan Schaub here, but fly by the seat of your pants, whatever that saying is anyway. It really has been like, you know, and even people like Greg Jackson now, who was like the Lord and Savior of MMA, and I think rightly so, he's done a fantastic job. Like, who's the last really good fighter Greg Jackson has produced? Like, there really isn't one recently, is there? Maybe there is one. Maybe I'm forgetting one. But I remember Lando Venata coming through, but he hasn't really been great. I'm sure there's one person I'm missing, but that's how quickly things change.
But when you're kind of known as the top guy or the top gym, for example, like TriStar the last few years, fighters want to, like upcoming fighters want to go there. And you get these guys coming to you kind of already good prospects are already good, and you can kind of pick and choose. It's a nice situation to be in. But then, like, you know, for example, if you don't produce, as you said, like upper echelon or world champions in a few years, then people will go to TriStar or the next place. So if TriStar don't produce world champions, so yeah, I think like flying by the seat of your pants or whatever. I think like you can kind of see with the coronavirus stuff going on that like football and soccer is kind of, you know, doing that as well. Like everything's so finely balanced on like TV deals and fulfilling these, and then they're saying like what, a 6 to 9 billion or something ridiculous it will be lost if they don't complete the season in TV revenue, and never mind like court cases and stuff. So everything is kind of, all sports I think are kind of all sports that are kind of all year round or near all year round are kind of flying by the seat of their pants. It's just a way of the world.
Yeah, it is at the moment, but MMA has been doing it for 20 years. So I actually think that's why we're kind of more used to it, and this chaos is something we deal with all the time. But one
that's why Dana's like, this is just another chaos. Don't worry about it.
It isn't, but in a way it kind of is.
We're just gonna play it through like we always do.
Yeah. It's mad. One last thing maybe before we finished up. I was looking at, it was funny because I was looking at 2 fights and I haven't really watched that many fights because this has been a little bit cathartic with me with fighting, because I feel like I'm going to get my love of fighting back again, because I kind of lost it for a while. Well, not lost it, but it wasn't as huge as it used to be. But now I'm going to be really looking forward to fights coming back. But however, I watched like 2 fights in the last week, and one was Mike Tyson versus Frank Bruno. It was on like BT Sports or something, and the other one was John Jones versus Shogun Rua. So I connect those fights by saying John Jones versus Shogun Rua was the fight that Jones won to win the championship, and Joe Rogan said after, this is like the new breed of MMA fighter. This is what it's going to be. Now, every time when we saw John Jones coming through, I think we all kind of looked and saw, this is a guy with 2 brothers in the NFL. This is an A1 athlete. He literally just took up MMA because I think his wife was having, or his girlfriend at the time was having a baby, and he's like, I need money, I'll just become a world champion. That sort of athlete.
And he's out there kind of like German suplexing Stephen Bonner and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But I think you look at that Mike Tyson fight, right? And you see him fighting Frank Bruno, and just before they even throw a punch, you look at the physical specimens. I think they have those physical specimens in boxing because of the amount of money for years. And I always remember Luke Thomas saying that people, you need a preclusion to violence as well as being, you know, physically able and all. And I think that's a huge thing. And that's even more so for MMA, because it's a way more, you know, violent sport in terms of the, you know, different ways of jiu-jitsu and all. You need the ability to be, you know, to have an intelligence as well, and to be willing to do it all and not just box. But I think when you look at old school boxing, right, as compared to old school MMA, you had the athletes there, like even the Joe Johnsons back years and years and years ago, or or, you know, whoever, even Steve Collins, you know, for Ireland. He was a really, really good athlete back in the 90s. Whereas in MMA, like, was Heist Gracie actually that good of an athlete? Okay, I think Ken Shamrock was, but like the Taylor Tooley wasn't a great great athlete, you know.
Yeah.
And
But also, if you're one of these really good athletes, like we've all known these guys in school or as kids or whatever, where you're just really, really good at every sport, like,
Yeah,
or nearly
that's
every
true.
sport.
Yeah.
And are you going to choose like this unknown sport, MMA or, you know, UFC on tapes or on pay-per-view, or then not on pay-per-view even?
Yeah.
Or are you going to choose like boxing or soccer or something that has like a clear route, a clear path at the time to like money and stardom and celebrity and all that stuff that a lot of people want?
Yeah, I think that's I really think that's that's a huge part of it, because that's the thing we're kind of missing out on, because we're missing out on lots of those really big athletes, like, and MMA won't get that. And it's still the same situation as it was with John Jones. It's money. You know, John Jones came in to get money because he could get quick money, and he realized, but there aren't really that many people in that situation. And also a point, maybe it's a broader point for a bigger day, but I don't think that every athlete would be great at MMA. I remember, like, Americans always say, oh, if our NFL players and basketball players played soccer, we'd have the best team in the world. Well, you wouldn't, because LeBron James would probably be shit at soccer, because if you're like 6'11", you're going to be probably terrible at soccer. Let's be honest here. And fucking, you know, some guys like that. Your quarterback, what's his name? The Vikings quarterback.
Kirk Cousins.
No, is it the Vikings? Maybe it's not the. Oh no, it's Baltimore. The Ravens quarterback, isn't it? What's his name? The guy that really like, he's a really good runner. But anyway, people who listen, no, he'd be a good soccer player, because he's like 6'2", maybe, like one of the most athletic, skillful runners in the world. He'd be good at soccer, but like most of them wouldn't. But I think with MMA, I don't think physical ability, and it's not the only thing, but I think sometimes it can actually play against you. Like Yoel Romero, you look at him, like, he's an A1 top athlete. His physical ability, he has used it to his advantage, and we talked about that in the podcast before his last fight. But I think for most people, unless you have like the I mean this as a compliment, but the pig-headedness to use it in the way Yoel Romero uses it, it's actually not going to be good for you in a lot of ways. Like, if you're too big and too strong, you're going to have to cut weight to get down, so you're going to lose some of that. And that's another thing that'll take away the physical abilities as well in some way. But it's also going to, like, it's either going to drain you or it's going to slow you down.
It's going to make you slower. Like, you can't. Yeah. You're going to throw punches slower. You're going to do everything slower, and you're going to tire out quicker and all that stuff as well. You're going to have a strength advantage, obviously, as well, though. So, you need a certain body type for certain sports, like different sports.
100%. I think MMA at the moment, anyway, and this can change as well, but I think it's more of a speed sport than it is a strength sport at the moment. More of a skill sport.
Speed kills.
Yeah, it definitely does. All right. I think that was a good discussion anyway. So I'll have this up. I hope I'll have a video version up as well.
Just, you were saying that the break due to the coronavirus, you think it's going to rekindle your love for MMA, or do you think it's going to rekindle your love for Manchester United, or are you happy to not watch them?
We won 11, or well, we're unbeaten in 11 games in a row before it came out.
It's we again now, isn't it? You're back on the bandwagon.
Yeah, no, Bruno Fernandes brought me back. What a legend! Like, I was talking to the lads actually just before we started there, and we're like, do you know, like, Liverpool obviously either being handed the title or whatever happens now, like, it's actually been ruined on Liverpool. Like, it really has. Even if we come back and we play like this World Cup thing, and you know they win all the games and they win the league, it'll forever be the coronavirus league. Like, it forever will be, and that must be really shitty for you, because I was in the same situation, even worse, with Limerick 2 years ago, and if we won the hardest All-Ireland you could ever win, and it was great, it was like the best way to do it. But for Liverpool, this is like the worst way, isn't it? Like, it must be shitty, is it?
Yeah, well, I think it's a strange situation, because it's kind of, for a while now, it's kind of already been won in everybody's minds. Everybody's already kind of come to terms with it being won, and then all of a sudden it's just ground to a halt and there's no games, and it's just such a strange situation.
Yeah, it is. It's very weird.
In our whole lifetime, like, we haven't experienced this, and so yeah, it's just really strange. But when football does come back, it'll obviously it'll be so good.
Like, the weekend, I was just thinking, I was talking to Patrick Foran yesterday, like, imagine on a Saturday you're going to have like an early Premier League game. You're probably going to have 4 Premier League games on a Saturday. Then you're going to have GA games. If you're a fan of F1, you're probably going to have that Sunday morning. You're probably going to have another 3 or 4 Premier League games on a Sunday. Then you're going to have the UFC maybe on a Saturday night. You might have UFC on a Sunday as well. You're going to have boxing. You're going to have rugby if you like that. You're going to have golf. Like, there's going to be weekends, like probably 10 weekends in a row where you'll have all of those things all weekend. It's going to be just a festival of sport. Like that's what kind of keeping me I'm just kind of thinking of that. It's going to be unreal. Like, it's going to be fucking class. But anyway, yeah, that's it. That's the end of this podcast. Graham, thank you very much for joining me. Thanks everyone for listening.
No problem.
And we'll see you all next time. Good luck.